Tatsavitur Varanyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Diyo Yona Prachodayat Om. Our salutations to that Supreme Being, who is the Self in all. He is the source and sustenance of this universe. In Him we live, move, and have our being. May He illumine our hearts, and may He guide us in every way. Good morning. So our Swami Satyamayana was actually scheduled to speak here today, but he's been transferred to the center in Seattle, and there was some sort of legal imperative that made it urgent, and he's gone. And so we had to find some sort of second string backup swamis to fill in for his speaking dates this month. And so in that connection, my name is Swami Arupeshananda, and I'm here today to talk to you about self-reform. And so after this talk, this update in the schedule went out, I got an email from someone who said that they were very grateful that I chose this subject of self-reform, because the person said he'd been doing a lot of work on it, and he was looking for the talk, and he gave me another talk that he liked, that he thought was very inspirational. It was an AA talk, that's Alcoholics Anonymous. And so he sent me a link to this talk, and I listened. And I'm somewhat familiar with it because in Trabuco, the monastery where I used to live, we have AA meetings there twice a month. And actually, a lot of people come to Vedanta through AA. So some of the novices there, I've gone to meetings with them. Anyway, the talks all follow a specific format, which is what my life was like when I was addicted to alcohol, what happened to help me turn it around, and then what life is like now. For those of you who aren't familiar, that's the basic format. So he followed this format. And his talk, by turns, was heartbreaking and horrifying. He, under the influence of alcohol, wound up betraying, cheating, and lying to people that he loved and respected. He wound up pushing his pregnant girlfriend down a flight of steps. And some other terrible things he did. And what struck me at the time listening to this talk, which has happened before in AA talks, is the person who's saying these things, the person who's standing up in front of you, seems to be articulate, intelligent, open-minded, honest, sincere, vulnerable, right? A good person. They also seem well-dressed and successful most of the time, right? They seem like good people, and yet they're telling you these terrible things that they've done under the influence of addiction. And it's funny, the song you chose this morning, because I was just going to talk about this verse in the Gita that explains how it is that a good person can do such bad things, right? That's the mystery. You listen to these talks and you think, this person seems like a good person. How can he be doing such terrible things? And the Gita explains it, and we just heard them sing it this morning. Sri Krishna says, thinking about sense objects will attach you to sense objects. Grow attached and you become addicted. Thwart your addiction and it turns to anger. Be angry and you confuse your mind. Confuse your mind, you forget the lesson of experience. Forget experience, you lose discrimination. Lose discrimination, and you miss life's only purpose. Now, I think probably most of us haven't really struggled with alcohol addiction, but I think we all have some experience with this verse. You follow the bouncing ball all the way down the steps to the bottom here. And there's something that has drawn us. Maybe it's just time on the computer. Video games now. That's actually an official medical disorder. Video game disorder, it's called. It's not a very creative name. But anyway, whatever it is, something has drawn us out. Right? And where does it all start? Thinking. Thinking about sense objects will attach you to sense objects. Sri Ramakrishna says, the more we think about sense objects, the more we will be attracted to them. And this is something that you don't really have to believe. This is just a matter of common experience. In fact, this is so well known that even Facebook and Google know about it, right? We've all had this experience. You're on the computer and you are looking at shoes, for example. Okay, you're looking at shoes. Maybe you want to buy some shoes and you see some shoes that you really like, but you think, no, I'm going to hold back. I'm going to restrain myself. I'm not going to get these nice shoes. And you go and do other things. And what happens? Pictures of shoes show up in whatever you're doing. And they're not just random shoes. They're the shoes that you kind of lingered over, right? The ones that you really thought maybe those shoes, they come back, right? They come back. Because Google and Facebook know this. They know that if they can get you to think about these shoes more, then you'll be attracted to them. It's more likely you're going to buy them, right? That's where it starts. And then what happens? If we get hooked on something and it gets taken away, like that guy in the AA talk, we start doing really bad things to keep our addiction going. And what he said in his talk was that the reason he did all these terrible things, pushing his girlfriend, lying to his friends and family, was because either he felt like he had to serve his addiction, or he felt like the person, whatever it was getting in the way of his addiction. So he got angry and pushed the person out of the way down a flight of steps. And so I say that he seemed like a good person. And so many of these people in AA seem like good people when they talk to you. And so the question is, well, how do you know? How do you know that it's a good person doing bad things? I mean, certainly bad people do bad things, right? Why would I say he's a good person? How do you know? And this is important because if we are doing something that we're not happy with and we keep it up long enough, we start to doubt our own goodness. We do. We start to doubt ourselves. We start to wonder, am I a good person? Right? So it's actually a pretty important question. Certainly there are bad people who do bad things. When can you know that it's a good person doing a bad thing? Well, this question was famously addressed in the Pandava Gita. So there's the big war of the Mahabharata, and there's the good people, the godly people, the Pandavas on one side, and then there's the bad people, the demonic people, the Kauravas on the other side. So you've got clear black and white here, good and bad. And the bad people have done all kinds of bad things. They've lied and cheated and stolen the kingdom from the good people. And the good people have been very flexible and tried to work with the bad people and make peace. And the bad people are completely unreasonable and just want to kill them and steal their kingdom, and that's it. So there's going to be a war. And so Krishna tries to talk some sense into the bad people. He says, he calls the chief bad guy, Duryodhana. He calls him and says, look, what you're doing is wrong. This is not the path of Dharma. Stealing and cheating the rightful heirs of the kingdom out of their kingdom and taking it is evil. Don't do it, right? So what does he say in response? Very interesting, his answer. Now remember, this is the bad person doing a bad thing, right? This is not a good person doing a bad thing. This is a bad person doing a bad thing. So what does he say? He says, don't tell me what's right and what's wrong. I already know what's right and what's wrong. That's not my problem. My problem is that although I know what's right, I have no interest in doing it. That's my problem. And he says, although I know what is wrong, I have no interest in refraining from it. And then he goes on to say, you, Krishna, he knows, in spite of everything, he knows that Krishna is God in the flesh that he's talking to. And so he says, you, Krishna, I do as you, Krishna, seated in my heart, make me do. So he blames God for his actions, right? That's what the bad person does. He finds a scapegoat. And we may not blame God, we may blame our parents, our husband or wife, our boss, whatever, right? You find a scapegoat and rationalize your behavior. And his logic actually isn't that bad, right? I mean, in a universe with an omnipresent God, everything comes from God, including my bad tendencies. It all comes from God. And in a universe with an omnipotent God, everything, every action is done by God. God's doing the whole thing. None of this is my fault, right? Now contrast this to what the godly good person says to Krishna, right? Arjuna, he is the godly disciple, who may also have a whole bunch of bad qualities. In fact, Sri Krishna calls him a coward in the beginning of the book. He's not perfect, but his approach is very different. He says to Krishna, what is it that impels a man to do evil even in spite of himself? He asks this question, right? He wants to know how to get out of it, right? The bad person rationalizes it, dismisses it, continues his behavior. The good person, in spite of whatever defects of character that may be there, bad habits or whatever else, wants to overcome it, wants to rise above it, right? That's the difference. And like I say, it's an important one, because although we may have the best of intentions, we may also realize, painfully so, that we are suffering from a bunch of limitations, character defects that we would like to overcome. And the Gita goes on in a later chapter to describe in very graphic detail just what these defects are. It has a chapter on divine and demonic tendencies, where it talks about good people and bad people. This is what good people are like, and this is what bad people are like. I remember I read that chapter when I was about 19 for the first time. And I had recently decided that I was going to be a spiritual person. That's what I was going to do with my life at 19. I'd made this decision. I actually got initiated younger than that, but I was basically a normal teenager. I had moments of religious interest, but basically I was a teenager. And then at 19, by God's grace, I decided I was going to be a spiritual person. That was my life. And so in that connection, I was staying in a monastery in Portland, Oregon. And with my new resolve, I'm upstairs in the monastery reading this chapter on divine and demonic tendencies in the Bhagavad Gita. Now, everybody else in the monastery at this time, they're all downstairs. It's time for noon worship. And so Swami Arupeshananda, he was the abbot of the monastery at the time, he's doing the puja. And there's a room full of people behind him meditating in silence. And his puja was mostly silent, too, except for clanging of things. So that's going on downstairs. I'm not there. I'm upstairs reading the Bhagavad Gita. And it quickly becomes painfully obvious to me, in seeing all these godly and demonic tendencies, that I seem to have almost all of the demonic tendencies. I mean, I'm looking at my own character profile here, and I get to the godly tendencies, and it seems like I'm bankrupt. I've got none of that stuff, right? And this was a great shock to me. And being idealistic and 19 and hopeful, I was crestfallen, and I started to cry. So I'm upstairs sobbing away over my Bhagavad Gita, and up comes one of the monks from the worship. and he says, Swami's calling you down in the shrine. And I thought, well, that's odd. Swami has never called me into the shrine before, and how does he even know I'm not there? I mean, he's got his back to everybody. He's doing the puja, and they're all behind him, right? So anyway, okay, and I'm a little nervous because Swami's pretty intimidating, and he's never called me into the shrine before. So, okay, I'm going to go down there. And I open the door, and he turns, and he says, is Lal Chand there? And again, I'm kind of shocked. Wow, he's calling my name out in the middle of the puja, you know. So, you know, nervously, I say, yes, Swami, I'm here. And he says, Lal Chand, this life is hard. And that was it. Went back to doing the puja. That was his verdict on, I mean, it was clear to me at the time that he seemed to know everything that was going on upstairs, that I was sobbing over the Gita, and all the reasons why, and this is the answer. This life is hard. And so I thought, I didn't really even get it at the time. I didn't quite understand what he was talking about. I mean, what life is hard? What life is hard? The life of self-reform is hard. That's what he was telling me at the time, and I didn't get it. I didn't even get it when I was reading the Gita. When I was reading the Gita and I was seeing all these bad qualities and all these good qualities that I didn't have, I just thought I'd picked the wrong career. That's it. I just thought it was hopeless. This is obviously not for you. This is for somebody else. This is for people with better qualities than you have. That's what I was thinking, right? The idea that I was going to have to change myself and my list of qualities, and that this would be perhaps the bulk of my spiritual life, would be a kind of effort at character transformation, self-reform. I hadn't even admitted that as a possibility when I was sobbing over the Gita. And that's slowly, it kind of dawned on me that that's what he meant. That get ready for some work on yourself. Get ready for self-reform. And this isn't going to be easy. And of course, there are those of us, at least you read about it in the books, I haven't actually met any, who don't seem to have to do this. They start off and they have some vision and that's it, you know, they're saints from day one. But as Oscar Wilde says, every saint has a past and every sinner has a future. And that's the general case that I've seen, is that all the saintly people I've known have had a past. And yes, this life is hard. And when you start on this self-reform business, you kind of sympathize with Duryodhana, the bad demon who says it's all God's fault, right? Because first of all, you're comfortable with your habits, a lot of them. Even some of the self-destructive ones we've sort of learned to be comfortable with. And so you don't really want to try this. And then when you try it, you feel like it's not really working. Your habits aren't really changing. You know, you're putting some effort into it, but things don't seem like they're always getting that much better that quickly. And so you wonder, is this going to work? Am I going to beat my habit, whatever it is, alcohol or chocolate or video games or people you're hooked on or habits of thinking, whatever habit it is? Am I going to be able to beat it? How do I know that the darkness won't cover me? What guarantee is there? Well, according to Vedanta, it won't. The darkness won't. It won't cover us, it won't beat us, because we are bigger and better than our habits. However strong and tenacious they seem, Vedanta teaches that we are, in essence, the truth of who we are, beneath these habits, is divine, is perfectly free. Swami Vivekananda puts it this way. He says, the Vedantic ideal is that you are divine, This is the essence of Vedanta. Know the human soul to be pure and omniscient. All such ideas, as we can do this, but we cannot do that, are superstitions. We can do everything. Vedanta teaches men to have faith in themselves first. As certain religions of the world say that a man who does not believe in a personal God outside of himself is an atheist, so the Vedanta says a man who does not believe in himself is an atheist. Not believing in the glory of our own soul is what Vedanta calls atheism. So before we embark on this self-reform business, we have to have the faith, the idea, the willingness to accept the idea that we are divine. This isn't like force-fed faith, like you get believe this or else, right? You get that in especially Abrahamic traditions. If you don't believe A, B, and C, then you can't be part of our group and we stand up and recite something that we believe. It's not like that, right? This is, you hear it. We just heard it, and now we think about it. Is this reasonable? Is this something I'd like to consider, right? Is this something that I would like to accept? So let's think about it. We have, each one of us, in whatever situation we find ourselves, two forces. One that tells us, go ahead and do it. You've done it so many times before. It's fun. You like this. One more time won't hurt you. And another voice that says, you've done this enough. Every time you do this, you suffer from self-hatred, shame, remorse, a hangover, whatever. We all have this experience, right? We all have these two forces. The one is the lower force driving us towards desire. The other is the higher force, which is the voice of freedom and the voice of discretion and wisdom. We have these forces. All of us have this. Nothing to believe here, right? We all experience this. It's direct and immediate. What is Vivekananda saying? You are the higher voice. You are the higher force. That's what you are. That lower, whiny voice that wants more attention, more friends, more video games, more food, whatever it is, that's not who you are. You are divinity. You are the divine within. So that seems like a good proposition to accept, right? So the next question, so I would say, why wouldn't you accept that? I can't think of any good reason why I say, no, I'd rather be the lower voice, or I'd rather be the no, right? You're not going to do that. So the next question is, how do we assimilate this? How do we make it a fact of our lives? How do we practice it? And Holy Mother has some good advice. She says, learn to divide the mind into two parts, which I don't think we have to learn, actually. I think the mind is pretty clearly divided in these situations already. But she says, learn to divide the mind in two parts, discrete and indiscrete. The discrete mind is like the parent, and the indiscrete mind is like the child. Parents are always watchful over their children. You should scold and punish the mind if it does anything wrong, as parents scold naughty children. So that's her advice. Be the parent, be the grown-up, right? Be the voice of conscience in your head. Right? Now, this is one of those, if you've paid attention to your mind in these situations, you know that sometimes you're the parent and sometimes you're not. If the situation that presents itself to you is too far outside of your comfort zone and too far below your ethical standards and something you don't usually do, and yet it has a certain appeal, you say, no, we're not doing that. We're not going to go there, right? You're the grown-up, right? You're the voice of reason and responsibility. But if it's a habit that you've indulged over and over and over again, then you are firmly identified with the spoiled child in your mind. Yes, right? But then you're so the kid at that point that you start arguing with the parents. No, here's all the reasons why this is okay. I've done this so many times, whatever rationalizations we come up with, right? So sometimes we can't even really believe that we're the parent because we have a habit that's so ingrained. And Holy Mother talks about this. She says, If a bad habit takes root in the indiscreet mind for many days, then 100 scoldings cannot uproot it. At that time, pray. Pray to Sri Ramakrishna to change the weak mind. There is no other way. So that's her advice. When we're in one of those situations that we have some discretion, a habit that hasn't got its fingers around our neck, then we can be the mature voice of reason. But if this thing's got us, basically it's time to beg God for help. And she says that he can recast the old mind into a new one. As a potter gives shape to raw clay, he can give shape to the human mind according to his wish. So the grace of God is what we're asking for in these situations, right? When all else fails, pray. And this is, of course, found in every religion. One of my very favorite teachings along these lines comes from St. John of the Cross. He calls these episodes of grace, he calls them intoxicating consolations. Isn't that great? Intoxicating consolations. And he talks about the effect of an intoxicating consolation in our life. He says a single one of these may be sufficient to abolish at a stroke certain imperfections of which the soul had vainly tried to rid itself during its whole life, and leave it adorned with virtues and loaded with supernatural gifts. A single one of these intoxicating consolations can change the whole deal. I believe this. I do. At this point, really, that's not saying much, because I've seen too much to really reasonably entertain any alternative explanation. But even the first time I read it, I thought, yes, that's true. And that's a little bit of this sort of believe it or else faith that I was mentioned a few minutes ago. You don't have to have it, but sometimes it just comes. Sometimes you read something and it just resonates with you and you think, yes, that's true. And for whatever reason, from day one, I believed that God's grace could save the human condition. All the miseries and limitations of our lives, I think, can be fixed by one of what St. John of the Cross calls these intoxicating consolations. And I think it can even trickle down to the most mundane things in our lives that we think maybe the universe has no interest in. I think it does. And I'm going to read an example from a woman who tried to quit smoking. So this is her experience of God's grace helping her to quit smoking, okay? She says, when I was about 40, I tried to quit smoking, but the desire was on me and had me in its power. I cried and prayed and promised God to quit, but I could not. I had smoked for 15 years. When I was 53, as I sat by the fire one day smoking, a voice came to me. I did not hear it with my ears, but more as a dream or a sort of doublethink. It said, Louisa, lay down smoking. At once I replied, will you take the desire away? But it only kept saying, Louisa, lay down smoking. Then I got up, laid my pipe on the mantel shelf, and never smoked again or had any desire to. The desire was gone as though I had never known it or touched tobacco. The sight of others smoking and the smell of smoke never gave me the least wish to touch it again. Just gone. The magic voice shows up, gone. But let's do the math, okay? 40, she tries to quit. She's been smoking for 15 years. She cried and prayed and promised God to quit and failed repeatedly, right? She's 40. She gets the voice at 53. So that's 13 years of crying, praying, promising, failing before the magic voice shows up and takes it all away, right? And so, yes, I think that's really maybe what Swami Arupeshananda was referring to when he said this life is hard. Yes, you're going to overcome this, and yes, you're going to work for it. On the other hand, when it's over, when you're done with it, just like her, you are really finished with it. You have really outgrown something. In a sense, you have transformed. Your mind has transformed. And this is especially true, even more than habits of doing with habits of thinking. When you can outgrow one of your destructive thinking habits, like being suspicious of everyone, or worrying what everybody thinks about you, or whatever it is you think about other people, thinking that you're not good enough, or thinking that nobody else is good enough, whatever the problem is, right? Most of us have these habits of thinking, and we're not even really aware of them. We have toxic thought loops. And one of the things that happens if you start meditating is you start identifying these toxic thought loops. And then you realize that you need to get rid of these things. And then once you actually even start to overcome one of these things, how liberating it is. To change the way you think is to change the world you live in. And we actually find that when we don't treat people with suspicion or anxiety or whatever it is that we treat them with, they react differently. It's amazing. But this work is required. And you think, well, why? First of all, you got to be patient. Second of all, you have to work and struggle. And what is that? What did I say? Cry, pray, promise to God, fail repeatedly. What is that? That's hell. That's what that is. I don't think there's any other word for that except hell. To cry, pray, promise, and fail repeatedly for 13 years is 13 years of hell, in my opinion. And what's the point? Why would I have to go through 13 years of hell to overcome this stuff? Well, actually, there is a point. Well, I should say a sort of point. I don't really know how to explain that one perfectly, but here's a pretty good one that maybe you can use to keep your attitude positive. And that is Swami Arupeshananda. He says there is a point to our tears and our failures. And this is a letter he wrote to a devotee in a beautiful book, if you have a chance, a little tiny book, very easy to read, called Consolations. And it was a letter he wrote to a devotee who is struggling with something or other, I don't know what. He says to this devotee, "You say that the world is a place of great temptation. That indeed is true. But do you know that strong adverse winds serve but to confirm the roots of a weak tree?" Did you follow that? But do you know that strong adverse winds serve but to confirm the roots of a weak tree? The good moral principles which are now not so strong in you are sure to get firmly rooted by an incessant struggle with temptations. Constant exercise and struggle improve one's physical health. And our mental health, too, is not above this law. So, our smoker lady friend, she cries and prays and promises and fails. And then and when that happens, you're miserable. You think, gosh, can I ever overcome this? How can I promise something to God and fail like this over and over again, right? What's happening there, according to Swami Arupeshananda, is that she is growing in moral fiber, and it doesn't seem like it at the time. That's what's kind of confounding about this. You just feel like you're a failure. But to keep this in mind is most beneficial and constructive, right? I'm not a failure. I'm still trying, which means I'm getting stronger, and I'm going to beat this because that divinity is within me, right? So far today, I've given you basically two methods for overcoming habits. One is the parent-child mind thing, where if you're sort of in control and you're just kind of gently steering the wheel of your life, you can be the parent and tell the child mind, no, don't do that. The other one is to pray desperately and struggle and cry for a long time until whatever it is goes away. And this has both come from Holy Mother. This is her advice, right? I'd like to give one more very practical method that I know from personal experience works. And perhaps more importantly, it's actually scientifically proven, for what it's worth. Has anyone heard of the Stanford Marshmallow test? Does anybody know what that is? There are some who know. Okay. So the Stanford Marshmallow test was given back in the 1970s. And what happened was a bunch of 4-year-olds were given marshmallows by psychologists. And so a psychologist calls in each 4-year-old into his office, and he actually had a choice, or he or she had a choice. Marshmallow, pretzel, or cookie, I think. And so he gets to pick, and then the psychologist says to the 4-year-old, okay, I'm going to leave the room now for a few minutes. I have something else to do. I want you to not eat that marshmallow. I want you to wait until I get back. And if you can wait till I get back before you eat that marshmallow, then I'll give you another marshmallow as a reward. Right? So this is obviously a test of how much self-control in the form of gratification delay 4-year-olds have. Okay, it actually doesn't sound that interesting, as you can imagine. Some of them could wait for the marshmallow and some of them couldn't, right? Obvious. But the interesting thing is that the psychologists followed these 4-year-olds for the next 30 plus years and tried to figure out what's the significance of those who can delay gratification and exhibit some self-control and those who can't. How do their lives unfold? And so it turns out, probably not surprisingly, that the 4-year-olds who could delay gratification with the marshmallows turned out to be much healthier, happier people than the ones who couldn't. They got better grades, they were more popular in school, they were better able to deal with the problems of adolescence, all these little psychological markers they took into account. Perhaps least surprisingly, they were not nearly as likely to be overweight after the age of 30 as the ones that had to eat the marshmallow right away. And so, why do I bring this up? What's the spiritual, how do we put this into practice in our spiritual life? And it's, I'll tell you a story that illustrates it. And that is, this is again back when I was living in the monastery in Trabuco. We had a visitor there. He was an occasional overnight guy, spend a few nights, and then he'd go back to his life out in the world and do whatever he did. And so he's gone after spending some time in the monastery with us, and he calls me up on the phone, and he says, I had a really bad day at work, and I've got a joint in my hand, and I want to smoke it. Is that okay? You know, which is a tough one for me. I mean, I'm not really in a position to say if that's okay or not okay. And there's really no right answer. You know, yeah, go ahead. No, I can't say that, right? No, don't do it. I can't say that either. Why not? Because then he'll do it anyway, and he'll feel 10 times worse about doing it after he does it. That monk told me not to, and now I feel so guilty and horrible because I did it anyway, right? So I can't say no, and I can't say yes. So I went for gratification delay. I said, first go and sit at your shrine. I don't know if he had one, but I told him to sit at his shrine and tell God all the things that happened to you that day, all the things you're irritated about and all this stuff. And then tell him, I'm giving you 20 minutes. I'm going to sit here with you for 20 minutes. And if after these 20 minutes I want to smoke this joint, I'm going to go smoke it. I don't know if he actually did that or not. But, I mean, I never followed up on it. But the idea is this. The guilt, you know, the problem is when we got a habit that we indulge, the sense of shame and self-hatred, I think, is worse than the habit itself a lot of the time. And I know from my own experience that if you can do that, whatever it is that you want to do, that you don't want to do, right? If you can first give God a few minutes and delay gratification, and then after it's over, magically you find a lot of the time you don't actually need it anymore. 20 minutes is frequently enough to overcome whatever it is. But not always, right? Maybe you still need to have a pint of Ben & Jerry's and sit down in front of whatever. I don't watch any. Game of Thrones, is that still on TV? I don't know, whatever. So this actually is why I gave this subject for the talk today. As I said in the beginning, our Swami Satchidananda got transferred to Seattle. And I didn't really have much time to look for a subject or to think about what I was going to say. So I looked at the calendar to see what spiritual things were imminent. And what jumped out at me was Lent. Lent is coming up on Wednesday. It is the ultimate gratification delay spiritual experiments, in my opinion. This thing works. I'm not a Christian, and I was not raised a Christian, but Lent works anyway. It does. And I think the reason Lent works is because, first of all, there's, I think, two reasons. First of all, there is the power of the avatar. You know, in the Vedantic tradition, the idea is that Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, Ramakrishna, all these, they are all manifestations of the one. Right? There is the one divine being that comes again and again to show human beings the way to spiritual growth. And Krishna's quote in the Gita, he says, "When goodness grows weak, when evil increases, I make myself a body. In every age, I come back to deliver the holy, to destroy the sin of the sinner, to establish righteousness." So this is the idea, that the avatar comes repeatedly for our welfare, right? Things start to go south. And it's time for the avatar to come and establish righteousness and destroy the sin of the sinner. And the idea is at these times that the avatar unloads a bunch of spiritual power, disperses it in the world, and it's there for our access, right? If you don't know this, and was tempted by the devil and emerged triumphant, right? Why did he do that? If he's God in the flesh, does he need to go perform austerities? No. He did that for us. Gratification delay. This is what people do with Lent. If you don't know, in Christian traditions, what happens, mostly Orthodox and Catholic, what they do is they try and change their habits during this period, whatever it is. They try and adopt some new good habit, or they quit some bad habit. Frequently people quit sweets. I know one person who quit beer. I don't know if he started it again. One year I quit sweets, and I was so happy with it that I didn't eat sweets for years afterwards. And I know someone who quit smoking entirely. I mean, she just did it for Lent, but then after Lent, no more cigarettes. One year in the monastery, I decided to clean my cell every day for 15 minutes. And you know, the neatniks may scoff at that one, but for me, that was very challenging. And I found myself by the end of Lent, scrubbing the walls because I didn't know what to do, just trying to clean something because it was so clean in there. And that, after Lent was over, that stopped. I didn't keep that up. But the nice thing about Lent is that you can modify your behavior indefinitely. That's the second part about Lent that I think is so great. The first part is the power of the avatar. You go through Lent and you say, okay, well, if Jesus went 40 days without eating, surely I can go one more day without video games or whatever it is, right? That's the first thing. Draw on that austerity, right? Bring it into your mind. The second thing, it's the perfect amount of time. It's actually 46 days because of Sundays. So it's actually 46 days of abstaining or embarking upon whatever it is you're going to abstain from or embark upon. And at the beginning, that's so far away that you might as well just not think about it. Don't count the days. Okay, now there's 45 days, 44 days. No, it's just too long. So just put it out of your mind and pretend that Lent is the rest of your life because it's too long to really worry about, right? That's the first part, okay? So 46 days is long enough where you, in the beginning of it, put the thing out of your mind, whatever it is. But it's also short enough that it's not forever. You're going to get it back, right? That pain of separation, I'll never be able to eat Ben and Jerry's again, or whatever it is, right? Isn't there. Because after Lent is over, you'll be able to decide much more consciously than you could in the beginning. So this has been my experience. And the reason I gave this talk on self-reformation today was because Lent's coming up on Wednesday. Ash Wednesday is this coming Wednesday. And as far as this, and what is this? This is this gratification delay, this extended gratification delay, is a kind of accessible self-control, right? It's a kind of accessible change of habits, something that you can actually try immediately. That is difficult but not impossible. It's doable, right? And this is what Swami Arupeshananda says will confirm the roots of a weak tree, right? Will grow, will be stronger at the end of this. And of course, after this, the Stanford Marshmallow test was very famous, got a lot of press, and in the years since, it's gotten criticized and repeated and refined, and they've done all kinds of new versions of it. And the latest Stanford psychologist I read, her name is Kelly McGonigal, and she's been doing this research on self-control. And this is what she has to say about it. She says people who have better self-control are better off almost any way you look at it. They are happier and they are healthier. Their relationships are more satisfying and last longer. They make more money and go further in their careers. They are better able to manage stress. They are better able to deal with conflict and overcome adversity. They even live longer. When pit against other virtues, willpower comes out on top. Self-control is a better predictor of academic success than intelligence. It is a stronger determinant of effective leadership than charisma. It is more important for marital bliss than empathy. So, what did Jesus say? I am come that they may have life and more abundantly, right? That's why he went out into the wilderness, so that we might have life more abundantly. Self-control is proven to be the way to get it. And here is this opportunity for us to practice it. That, in my mind, is the significance of Lent. So, whatever our habits are, habits of, doesn't have to be a habit of doing, it could be a habit of thinking. I remember one Lent I decided I wasn't going to say anything critical about anything, no matter what it was. It could be obviously, I don't like mosquitoes. No, nothing critical for Lent, right? Of course, I wasn't perfect, but it makes you much more aware of your thoughts, because from thoughts, words proceed, right? So, whatever our goals are, if we want a better life in this world, if we want to improve our minds, if we want to grow spiritually, this is the life more abundant that we can get from greater self-control. So today's lecture is, I would say, a call to action, right? Go for it on Lent, Wednesday. Find something, figure out something. Try some new thing, give up some old thing, whatever it is you're going to do. It starts on Wednesday, 46 days, you can do it. May the good Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to smile upon you and be gracious unto you. May he lift his countenance upon you and give you peace. May good betide all. May happiness come to all. May all see the face of truth and be fortified with the armor of love, goodwill, joy, and understanding. Peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us. Peace be unto all. Hari Om, Hari Om.
From the one has come the many, in the many shines the one. Of all the forms there are not any that have not come from the one. Smaller than the smallest, greater than the greatest, the light beyond all darkness, the love within our hearts. In the stillness of the mountains, in vast skies of brilliant blues, in ancient worlds and modern cities, that wondrous light of light shines through. Brighter than the brightest, higher than the highest, deeper than the deepest, the love within our hearts. Across this world are many people, so many creatures great and small. We are all children of the mother, she is the one who made us all. Beauty of all beauty, yet beyond both time and space, still dwelling in each moment, bestowing on us her grace. From the one has come the many, in the many shines the one. Of all the forms there are not any that have not come from the one. Smaller than the smallest, greater than the greatest, the light beyond all darkness, the love within our hearts. The light beyond all darkness, the love within our hearts.
So now I'd like to make a few announcements. I said that I had to come up with a topic, and I looked at the spiritual calendar, and Lent jumped out at me, but there are other options. Because Shivaratri is Tuesday. That's here. It's also in Hollywood. We have Sri Ramakrishna's birthday is on Friday, celebrated here on Friday, celebrated on Sunday in Hollywood. And then next Sunday, our own Pravrajika Krishnaprana is going to speak on faith is life and doubt is death. And Wednesday, that's Ash Wednesday, we have a class on Seekers of God. Beautiful book. I don't know if everybody here is familiar with it, but that's definitely worth reading. And then there's the Gospel of Ramakrishna class on Saturday at 5 p.m. So thank you all very much for coming, and I'll be happy to greet you outside.